All right, we are on page 94 now. We're transitioning back to Ben's story. Let's go ahead and read. Ben opened his mother's jewelry box and picked up the silver locket Janet had been wearing. His mom's name was Elaine Wilson, and the locket had a fancy EW engraved on the front. It was pretty. Ben had no idea where his mom had gotten it or why she'd never worn it. He tried to open the locket, but it seemed to be sealed shut. He looked into the little mirror on his mom's dresser and put the locket around his neck anyway. The silver was smooth against his chest. Janet had left the closet door open. Ben walked over and breathed in the familiar smell of his mom's clothing as he crawled inside. When he was little, he loved hiding in there, behind her dresses, perched uncomfortably on her shoes. As his mom got ready for bed, she'd say, "I wish Ben were here to tuck me in," or, "Too bad Ben isn't here to read this great book with me." He would hold his breath, trying not to laugh. Sometimes she'd call, "Ben, are you there?" And he would answer, "No!" At the last minute, she'd always say something like, "Well, I wonder where my slippers are," and she'd open the closet door and act surprised when she found Ben hiding inside. It had been a long time since they'd played that game. Ben rested his head on his knees. He closed his good ear with a finger, blocking out the sound of the wind outside and the rain that had just begun to patter against the roof and the windows. He thought about the coffee can sitting on the shelf above him. He crawled out, pulled over a chair, and took it down. There was a lot of money inside the can, maybe a few $100s. Ben couldn't believe his mom had saved so much money. Did she have other secrets hidden in the room? What if his aunt and uncle sold the house before he found them? He put the can back and felt around in her folded sweaters. Nothing. It felt strange and wrong to go through her things, but he couldn't stop. He climbed down and opened the drawers in the nightstand and in her dresser. He found endless bills and unreadable tax documents and articles ripped from magazines. There were files related to the library and a ton of papers he couldn't understand. Then, in the bottom right-hand dresser drawer, he found a plain cardboard envelope. He pulled it out and turned it over. There was no address or stamp. Carefully, he opened it. Inside was something wrapped in tissue paper. The paper wasn't taped down, so Ben pulled it off. He discovered a small blue book, its covers soft and creased with age. On the front, the title was stamped in black letters, Wonderstruck. He flipped through the pages. The book was about the history of museums. On the back it said, "Published by the American Museum of Natural History, New York, New York." Was this a present his mom was going to give him? Was she hiding it, waiting to surprise him? Ben turned to the front of the book. A child had scribbled some pictures around the edges of one of the opening pages, little flowers and leaves. In the center was an adult's handwriting in red ink. It read, "For Danny, love, M." Ben wondered who Danny could have been and who M was. The handwriting was old-fashioned, so maybe the inscription had been written 100 years ago. Maybe his mom had found it at the used bookshop in town, or maybe someone had donated it to the library's annual book sale. Either way, it was Ben's now. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he held the book as gently as he could. He hadn't read anything since the accident, but he turned a few pages in Wonderstruck and started reading. Back in the year 1869, New York City had no museums of any kind, either for art or for natural history, such as were to be found in Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, Washington, and in all the capital cities of Europe. Young Theodore Roosevelt built a small museum in the back porch of his house, and his father that same year enlisted in the movement to start the American Museum of Natural History. But let us pause here and ask ourselves, what exactly is a museum? Is it a collection of acorns and leaves on a back porch? Or is it a giant building costing tens of thousands of dollars, built to house the rarest and finest things on earth? It's both, Ben heard himself say out loud. Of course, the answer is both. A museum is a collection of objects, all carefully displayed to tell some kind of magnificent story. Think of the endless examples of shells, rocks, bones, and gems on display in the grandest museums all around the world. These objects didn't appear out of nowhere. Someone like young Teddy Roosevelt perhaps collected, cataloged, and curated them. Rain continued to cascade against the roof and the windows, making a soft, distant drumming sound as Ben read on. All right, I want you to pause there really quickly. In fact, we'll reread the top of 98 again in a moment, but I want you to click on the next slide. The next slide is going to discuss how to log into Flipgrid. It has a little link for you, so watch the video first and then attempt it. And we're going to ask ourselves a question and respond to it on a video in our Flipgrid next, okay? And it's referring to Ben and the pages that I just read, okay? So go ahead, click on the next slide, follow the Flipgrid video instructions, and then begin, okay?